Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to change the world or make miracles, then do we have the Power of 8 show for you. Today I'll be talking with Lynne McTaggart, the award-winning best-selling author of 7 books, including The Field and the Intention Experiment, and a powerful new book and treatise that'll completely change how to view intentions and miracles, The Power of 8. And that's just what I want to talk with her about harnessing the miraculous energies of a small group to heal others, your life, and change the world. That plus we'll talk about turning water into wine, why Jean-Paul Sartre was mistaken, the power of chocoré, and what in the world, small moves, Ellie, has to do with anything. So welcome back to the show, Lynne. Are you ready to shine?
Oh, thank you so much for that intro. That was really lovely. You've obviously read this book.
I absolutely love your book, love the work you're doing, and I think it's important that literally everyone on the planet read this book.
Thank you so much.
Woohoo! So, before we dive right into things, we've had you on the show before, so we don't have to do a full history, but could you give us a Lynne McTaggart 101, or how'd you start down this investigative road?
Well, I started as an investigative reporter, and I was, covering things like trying to break baby selling rings when I first started out. I had hidden tape recorders and all those kinds of great gadgets. And I moved with my second book to the UK, and I was working on a biography, and then I met my husband, and we decided to do a publication together called What Doctors Don't Tell You, because I felt very strongly. I had been ill, and I had some real innovative, pioneering nutritional doctor help to get me better. All I had was a disturbed microbiome, which people know all about today, but they didn't back in the 80s. And so we started doing this newsletter, What Doctors Don't Tell You, and I kept coming across good studies of things like spiritual healing. So that set me on the path to try to find out why. And that in turn set me on the path of discovery of many, many scientists who are essentially uncovering a very new view of the world and discovering that we're all part of a giant energy field. But one of the things that they discovered, and that all became my book, The Field, what they also discovered was a lot of scientific evidence that thoughts are an actual something with the capacity to change physical matter. So I kept thinking to myself, well, wait a minute. This is the investigative reporter in me wasn't really satisfied by that, and not very satisfied by a lot of the claims being made about the law of attraction and the secret, et cetera, et cetera. And I also thought that if this was the case, it had been kind of trivialized into using intention to get more stuff or to manifest a parking space. And I kept saying, okay, well, if this is so powerful, what can we do with this? What are we talking about here? Are we talking about curing cancer or just moving a quantum particle? And why don't we do something big with this? Let's do something huge. Let's heal the world. And also, if lots of people are thinking the same thought at the same time, does that magnify the effect? So it was curiosity, really, and also a lot of skepticism that made me want to put this to the ultimate test. So I thought at the time I had a lot of scientists I knew from the field, and I had loads of readers because my books are in 30 languages and the field was. And so I thought, well, if I just put them together, I'll have the biggest global laboratory in the world. And so that's what I did with the field. And that's what I did with the intention experiment. It was an invitation, not just a book, but an invitation to participate in periodic experiments. And that's what we would do every so often. I would set up a well-controlled study with one of the scientists I knew at prestigious universities like Penn State, University of Arizona, California, University of California. And we would set up some controlled experiment and then ask readers or an audience, if I was speaking somewhere, to participate and send intention to that target. And we've run 30 of them, everything from trying to affect very subtle elements of a leaf, the light emissions of a leaf, to making plants grow faster, to trying to purify water, to lowering violence in war-torn areas, and even trying to heal somebody of PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And of those 30, 26 have shown measurable, significant results. Now, there's no drug out there, by way of comparison, that has that kind of consistent track record. So these really worked, but that wasn't the real point of my book now and why it's taken me 10 years to write this. The real point was when, and the real story was what was happening to the participants themselves and how they were transforming right in front of me.
And that kind of bypasses everything. And we'll jump around because I want to dive into some of the cool stuff in your book, but it certainly, it goes with saying that there was kind of, I think you call it a rebound effect. There was an effect going on the effectors, maybe that's the term for it, that was dumbfounding.
Absolutely. When I got around to the peace intention experiment, because, I very carefully took all these little baby steps that the scientists were suggesting. Scientists like to move one little experiment at the time. And so we were replicating early things, then we were moving on from one kind of seed experiment to another kind of seed experiment, then water, and doing loads of different water experiments. And I was starting to get fed up with all of this. And so around 2008, I said, come on, let's do something huge here. Let's lower violence in a war-torn area.
Yeah.
So we did this experiment on Sri Lanka, and it was certainly compelling, the evidence.
What exactly did you do?
Well, we spent 8 days we sending intention with little 20-minute windows every day. And I had about 15,000 people from all over the world participating. And during that week, that 8 days, and we chose 8 days because we looked at the transcendental meditation studies where they look at a critical mass of meditators in a certain town and find that if there's enough meditators there, the crime rate goes down. Mm-hmm. And their experiments ran for a minimum of 8 days. So we were looking at, trying to follow some of their protocol. When you're doing something new, it's always wise in science to try to look at what other people have done before, to stand on the shoulders of giants, so to speak. So we thought we'd run it over the 8 days. In that time, violence quadrupled. And I got really scared because I thought, oh my God, did we do this? And what else could we be doing? But then it plummeted to a level that was much lower than what had been before. And my scientist, my statistician, a professor of statistics called Jessica Utz from the University of California, had asked me to get 2 years worth of violence data, of injuries and deaths from these areas from before the experiment and then several months afterward. And so that's why we chose Sri Lanka. It was one place where they were very carefully counting the bodies. Not many places in a war zone do, or release it to people like me if they do. Now, certainly the U.S. wouldn't release anything to me. So we chose Sri Lanka. Violence levels then plummeted afterward. And when Jessica Utz did her timeline, looking at what had happened and looking for a trend, we definitely bucked the trend. And so I thought, wow, maybe something's going on here. But something even more interesting happened then, because it turned out that very week we sent intention was a kind of pivotal week in the whole 25-year course of the war. The government won some very decisive battles, which enabled them to then recapture the North, which was held by rebel forces then. And within 3 months, they had opened up the North again. And 5 months later, because of that 25-year war was over. Now, it ended in a bloody finish, no question, but it finished. So, of course, we said to ourselves, did we do this? And when Jessica looked at the fact that our 8 days had been pivotal to the entire course of the war, all she could say was, weird, huh? And we all felt weird, huh? Now, there's lots of variables. This could have been coincidence. You can't say with any certainty that we did this. But there was something really compelling going on there. But then the biggest shock for me wasn't that. But what was the biggest shock came to me after I had surveyed our participants. Now, I surveyed them because I simply wanted to find out how the experience was for them. Some of our early experiments had crashed because we had too many people on the server all at the same time. And we were neophytes to all of this. We didn't expect there to be thousands of people around the world joining in. And so, I wanted to find out if people had got on correctly, if everything had been okay for them. Did they enjoy it? How was it for them? Just a little survey. And thousands of answers came back with answers like this. I felt as though I were attached to a higher network. I had uncontrollable tingling all along my body, like I was, I had some sort of electricity in my body. I was sobbing uncontrollably. I felt like I was in the tractor beam that they talk about in Star Wars. And on and on and on, people describing essentially an altered state, a mystical experience. And then it carried on with what they were describing about what had happened in their lives. They were getting along better with everybody that they knew. They were resolving differences with people they'd been estranged from. They were essentially hugging strangers, and it was just shocking to me. Something amazingly peaceful and transformational had happened to them. And also when I started looking at this, looking at what mystical experiences comprise, I found that they have 5 elements. Like people like Abraham Maslow discuss things like, a very different physical feeling when people are having a mystical experience or an experience of enlightenment. They feel something really radical physically. They feel a sense of connection to other people. They feel oneness with the entire universe. They have some sort of blinding epiphany of meaning. Suddenly everything in the universe makes sense. These are all the things that happened to astronaut, the late Edgar Mitchell, when he was coming back from outer space, from the moon. He had this kind of feeling. And then finally, a sense of rejuvenation, like the grass is greener than it's ever been. The smells are more intoxicating than they've ever been. I know my life's purpose now. I love my job all of a sudden. All of that, coming in love with everybody they came in contact with. And my people had essentially experienced all 5 of those states. So to me, it was absolutely dumbfounding. What on earth had I done to these people? And so that really was what it started to suggest to me, that there is some sort of amazing rebound effect, a mirror effect that goes on when people are involved in a peace exercise like this, a peace intention that's collective. Their lives somehow get more peaceful.
And it's fascinating because it, in a sense, it kind of flips the whole law of attraction on its head, because we're not intending for us now, we're intending for somebody else. We may not even know the somebody else, and we're reaping the benefits from it.
Well, that was the interesting thing. It does turn everything that we thought we knew about the power of intention on its head, because every other aspect of what I started to discover, not only in my big intention experiments, but with the small groups of 8, was exactly that. When you get off of yourself, your life starts working, and there are residual mirror effects that occur when you're intending for someone else.
Beautiful. So let's go from there. I want to geek out on this in a minute. There's a particular element and research in this book that I am always drawn to, and it may be we've been writing a book on automatic writing, so we're looking at how the brain works with this. But Dr. Andrew Newberg and the parietal lobe.
Okay, well, this really has a lot to do with what ultimately we discovered too. Dr. Newberg did a lot of studies of people in these kind of mystical states. And he found that they were, when people like Sufi masters or Buddhist monks in ecstatic prayer or nuns praying, in ecstatic prayer too, or even Pentecostal church members speaking in tongues, there's a quieting of the parietal lobes of the brain. They are the parts of the brain, and there's kind of in the back here, they govern our sense of who we are in relation to everything else in the world. They say where we end and the rest of the world begins. They help us to navigate through space, but they also say you, not you. And in those experiments with Newberg, those parietal lobes were turned way down. And that meant the people were experiencing a real sense of oneness and a sense of connection, and they weren't feeling so separate anymore.
And on top of that, then there was another part of the brain that sounds like went offline as to where I am in the world. It's almost as if these people in your experiments were literally transporting somewhere else, in a sense, in consciousness at least.
Oh, absolutely. Now, I should say too, I mean, this was so mind-boggling to me that the investigator in me had to study this from every angle. And I'm really talking about our small groups too, the Power of 8 groups. And I'll explain in a minute how we started working with them. But when we put people into small groups, we were finding these kinds of altered states too, these shocking, amazing senses of, people crying uncontrollably, people feeling this amazing sense of oneness. So we decided to do a brain study on it. And I was lucky enough that Life University, the largest chiropractic university in the world, had seen me speak, and they offered me their psychology department essentially, and they said, we'll do a series of studies with you. And we've completed one. The first one we did, we just enlisted students who'd never done this before, and a lot of them had never even meditated before, put them into groups, small groups of 8-ish, and asked them to send intention to one of the members of the group with a healing challenge. Mm-hmm. And we found that when they were in the process of doing this, and I'm talking about the senders themselves, they had the identical brainwave signature that Dr. Newberg found when he was measuring these Sufi masters, the quieting of the parietal lobe, but also the executive portions of the brain, the frontal lobes. Now, they have a lot to do with us feeling about, our feelings of self, mm-hmm. but they also have a lot to do with things like worry, doubt, negativity. That was turned way down too. So all of this points to a kind of ecstatic state of connection, of oneness, of feeling much bigger than you are, of feeling part of the field, so to speak. But the fascinating part of it is, and the miraculous part of it is, in almost every other instance, people reach that state through years of practice and discipline and technique. Or they need hours of priming to get themselves into that state. Master healers, kind of rev themselves up into that state after a couple of hours. My guys were transported virtually in an instant. These sessions were only 10 minutes long. And also, most interestingly, they were all novices. The only instruction they had was a 13-minute video from me telling them how to do it. And so there was no other conclusion really I could draw. We always think of enlightenment, a state of enlightenment being necessary to have that years of discipline. But all I could see was now you don't need those years of practice. You don't need ayahuasca or a sweat lodge. All you need is a group and a group intention. And you are transported, fast-tracked essentially to the miraculous.
I want to dive into maybe a little bit of your protocol, the groups of 8, how you came there and move forward from there. But this is a question that popped out as I was prepping for this. And so this might even be taking off your science hat. And I'm not even sure what to call the hat that you'd put on. What do you think is happening in the fabric of space and time? Why is it wired this way? It's cool.
Okay. This was the question I've been asking myself for 10 years, to be honest, Michael. Mm-hmm. Just to start with how this all came about. This came about by total accident. I'm not talking about the measured effects of the large groups, but the little groups, the groups of 8. About a year after I started the intention experiment, I thought to myself, I guess I ought to do a workshop about this stuff with intention. But again, with a background in investigative reporting, I hadn't run many workshops. And, I wasn't even sure how to scale down some of the early effects we were seeing with the intention experiment to a workshop. What do you do? So I'm sitting around with my husband one day and we're kind of kicking around ideas. And I say, well, maybe I'll put them into groups of about 8 and I'll, have them send a healing intention to one of the members of the group. And Brian goes to me, yeah, power of 8. I really love that. And, he's a headline writer. So a natural headline writer. So we get to our first workshop, which is in Chicago. We put our people into groups of 8. There are about 100 at the workshop. And we ask them to do exactly that, send an intention to someone with a healing challenge. And I'm essentially telling them all this protocol that I'm making up as I go along. You all have to hold hands. You have to hold the same intention statement. Or you can put all of your hands together on somebody like the spokes of a wheel, but it has to be an unbroken connection. It seemed logical. I had no evidence for any of this. So I asked them to do this, and I asked them to come back the next day to tell us what happened. And so they came back, and I figured it was going to be, they were going to feel like they'd had a good massage or a feel-good exercise like a facial or something like that. But when we gave each of the recipients a mic in turn, the microphone in turn, they stood up and said things like this. I had IBS. I've had IBS for years and years, and my stomach feels completely clear and gone now. It feels I have no pain. Somebody else had arthritis, and they had lost their pain too. Someone else had headaches for as long as she could remember every day, and that was gone. And it was on and on and on like this. Serious changes. And so I sort of dismissed this as a placebo effect or projection. And yet, every time I ran a workshop, no matter where I was, the same effects started happening. We had amazing stories of, we had a woman with MS who showed up without her crutches the next day. We had another woman with terrible arthritis who was walking down the stairs normally the next day. Somebody with cataracts said she was 80% better. And on and on and on, hundreds, if not thousands of people in the various workshops and conferences that I've run this at. And so to me, it was so shocking and upsetting because I can only think of it as, that movie, Mr. Popper's Penguins, where all these penguins keep popping up and the Jim Carrey character doesn't know what to do with this. And I sort of felt the same way, like, this is all popping up and wait a minute, I'm doing these serious intention experiments. I'm trying to prove consciousness stuff. I'm not trying to be a healer. I'm not that. And so I really didn't want to talk about this. This is why it's taken me so long to do this book. As to why it works so well, I think it has a lot to do with a number of things. There is the power of intention, but even more, there is the power of the group, a group effect where you suddenly identify yourself as something larger. There is the power of being part of a group of strangers, as it has been in almost every instance, sending intention to somebody, just a selfless gesture being so powerful on the part of the recipient. There is the also, so much evidence on altruism. It's like a bulletproof vest. Anybody who does for other people in any way lives longer, is healthier. I mean, it's quite amazing. And I think there's all of those things. And then there's, the mystery of us all praying together, essentially, because that's what we're doing. And how that causes some sort of amazing brain synchronization. But I think, it's a situation where people move away from the little self to try to figure this out and in terms of the new science. People move away from their little self. They connect into a deeper level of consciousness. They access the field, and suddenly they're not individuals anymore. They're part of this great, giant intelligence. And I think that's what happens.
It strikes me. In fact, we had an interview a few weeks back on a woman who can communicate with bees, and she's a beekeeper, and what she has learned from the bees in her channeled work, and it got me thinking of the power of if humanity would come together in a group, and what we could do if, I guess, 8 minds and more minds come together with focused intention, just how powerful that could be.
Well, this is the whole idea that, I certainly want to investigate more. And, it occurred to me when I started doing the big peace intention experiments that the process itself is the healing element. And it's why I decided to do a giant American peace intention experiment, because I think America really needs it right now. Lots of areas of the world do, but what America does affects so many parts of the world. So it really needs it. It needs to lower violence and to heal all of the division. So I've set up a giant peace intention experiment that anyone can access. It's absolutely free. And Gaia, who have they are the providers of conscious media. They are a subscription service for conscious media, very kindly have donated all of their services and their resource to create this. So we have 6 half-hour broadcasts that talk all about the power of 8 and the power of group intention. And there's lots of interviews with some of the scientists who were involved and many of the people who have been healed by this process. We even set up our own Power of 8 group from the Mile High Church, and we have done intentions with them and interviewed them to find out, how it worked for them. And there are some extraordinary findings. But in the middle of all of this is an actual live intention experiment where people, all of the participants, are asked to send intention to lower violence in one of the most violent places in America. And we have a team of scientists who are going to measure the effects to find out what happened afterward. And we're also going to measure it from different angles, how we're going to use the Global Consciousness Project. We're going to use Jessica Utz again, our statistician, to compare what happened before and afterward. We're going to look at other areas of the atmosphere to see how it's changed in our collective consciousness if it's present, as it has been in the past. Dr. Nelson, who runs the Global Consciousness Project, has shown that his REG machines veer off their random course just at the point we do intention in our earlier peace intention experiments, with a signature that follows the exact same signature in every one of the experiments. So we're going to be measuring all of this. But here's the thing, Michael. I hope we lower violence there. I hope we do. It'll be great if we do. But I'm looking for a different kind of outcome as well. One of the things that really inspired me was what happened with a peace intention experiment I did on the 10th anniversary of 9/11.
Yeah.
And I was pretty sick of watching those burning buildings coming down, as they always do on every anniversary. I'm sure you are too. And I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I decided to invite somebody I know called Dr. Salah al-Rashid, who is like the Deepak Chopra of the Middle East. He's hosted many, he basically brought personal development ideas and New Age thinking to the Middle East. And he has tens of thousands of followers. And he has a lot of events and invites Westerners like me to speak there. So I invited him and his audience to participate. So we had my Western audience and his Arab audience, and we came together to send intention to 2 provinces in southern Afghanistan. And also both sides apologized to the other, when we started it off on a broadcast. They for not being more vigilant about the Arabs who did attack the U.S. We for America's outsized response to 9/11 and the fact that more than 100,000 innocent people were killed, injured, detained, or deported And these were just, civilians, etc. So they lost a lot more than we did, actually. So we started off with the apology. We did our intention. We got figures from NATO later. It looked like we had some sort of an effect. There was an amazing, unprecedented lowering of violence in just those two provinces we focused on. Now, again, maybe coincidence. There's a lot of variables in a war. Maybe we did, maybe we didn't. But the more interesting thing that happened was what was going on my Facebook pages and instant messengering. The Westerners and the Arabs started talking to each other and befriending each other. And before long, they started forgiving each other and saying things like, your God is my God. You're a brother to rely on from far away, and all kinds of amazing things. So I started realizing that we were, in a sense, winning the war in a different way, in our own little way. And so this is the whole point of the American Peace Intention Experiment, is I hope there are people of different ideas and persuasions tuning into this and participating, because what we found on all of our peace intention experiments is that feeling of connecting with people who are not like you, that ability to forgive, that sense of peace, that desire to hug strangers, etc., just radiates out into all of the individuals' lives. And so just think about the ripple effect of that. So that's the big plan for the American Peace Intention Experiment. And as I say, it's free for everybody to join in.
Where can people find out more, and can you give us the date of that?
Yes, it's running on September 30th through October 5th, and it's running the optimum time to watch it. All you need to do is sign up. It's totally free, and that's www.americanintentionexperiment.com. AmericanIntentionExperiment.com. And what will happen is you'll then receive, just a few hours before the event, the URL for that day's event. And each day you'll get another URL. So people just need to sign up. And it's the optimum time to observe it is to watch it. The webcast is 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern, 5 p.m. UK, 6 p.m. European. But because not everybody can make that time, each webcast will be up for 24 hours. I say it's ideal to watch it at the designated time because that's when most people will be watching it and the effects will be the largest for you.
Thank you. I want to talk about a few specific events which have made me think of you recently, and your work, one of which was the recent solar eclipse. And I couldn't help but think what would happen to all of the random number generators when so many people, and because the US is so internet connected, so social media crazy, how many people were focused on this single event at the same time. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, whenever there is any situation where people are focused at the same moment at the same time, there is a huge effect on random event generators. We've seen that with, the Global Consciousness Project has those REGs running all the time continuously, and they've measured what happens to them and against times of collective joy or collective horror, and also collective, focus. So the machines which are normally random, veer off their random course, and have veered off their random course at the turn of the millennium when people were celebrating around the world. They veered particularly with the Twin Towers disaster. They have done when people were watching for the outcome of O.J. Simpson's trial. Whenever there's a huge focus, they do. And, when lots of people are thinking the same thought at the same time, but they even pick up subtle things like my intention experiments. They just Roger Nelson just looks at what the machines are doing. Just at that moment, we send intention. And there was a particular movement off of a random course. And again, just in those 10-minute windows, and an absolutely similar signature between the, say, the Sri Lanka experiment and the 9/11 peace intention experiment. So any moment of focus, the eclipse, I mean, I think there would be an awe deal here. Very much like, it doesn't have to be collective horror. It can be collective joy and collective awe. And I think with the eclipse, there would be collective awe, and it probably would have affected them. And it'd be very interesting to see if Roger did take a look at it.
I'd love to hear about that. When we look at scale here, one of the interesting things that you found while you're doing experiments with people around the world, and I have to believe that the more that we get, and there's probably even these huge tipping points, and we've heard of like 10% of the world, if they think a certain way, different things take place. But what you also found that was dumbfounding is that small groups have massive change.
Yeah, I mean, what was really interesting, and we did this scientifically too, because one of our studies had to do with trying to make seeds grow faster. We did this with the University of Arizona, and we had 4 sets of seeds with each experiment, A, B, C, D. There were 30 seeds each. And I would run this experiment whenever I was speaking in front of a large audience or a small audience. And also I ran it once over the internet with thousands of participants. And the audience would choose one of the 4 sets of seeds randomly. I only had photographs of the seeds, by the way. The scientists would not know which ones we'd chosen. We'd send our intention to the chosen seeds. We'd tell the scientists we were done. They would plant all 4 sets. They would measure them 5 days later. And only when they were finished would we say, oh, it was seeds A or whatever it was. And we found that in every instance, and we ran it 6 times, the seeds sent intention grew significantly higher than the controls. In one case, they grew twice as high as the controls. But what was really interesting to me was that I had huge groups. I had thousands of people over the internet, and I had groups of 700, and I also had groups of 100. And it didn't make a difference. The groups that of 100 had a big effect too. The only thing that seemed to make some sort of an effect, and we only tried this once, so it'd be good to try it again, was the seeds grew twice as high as controls with one group, which was a group of healing touch practitioners. So it suggested that experience counts.
Very, very cool, particularly for the future.
Well, yeah, because the idea that small groups, and of course, in working with my little groups, not just the big intention experiments, but working with the little groups, I mean, we found massive change. One of the other things I wanted to do, my other petri dish here, was trying to study a batch of the groups myself. So in 2015, I set up a masterclass, a year-long masterclass, and I put people into little groups of 8 after having a 7-week teleseminar series with me where I taught them what I knew about intention, etc. And then I put them in these groups and suggested they meet week after week. And during that time, I would measure what was going on with them in terms of their health, their relationships, their career, their life's purpose. And they would, fill out forms and I would monitor the effects. So of those 250, about 150 of them met regularly every week, week by week by week, sending intention to each other, sending intention, having the group send intention to them. And pretty much 100% of them had major, significant, incredible life changes. I'm talking about healing 15 years worth of chronic fatigue. Somebody else, a clinical psychologist, who had tried everything in the book and couldn't heal his own lifelong depression and got over it, healed depression. Woman with vitiligo, her skin started repigmenting. Another woman regained a lot of her hearing. And then there were many stories of people who had, got dream jobs, had amazing synchronicitous events, had great monetary windfalls, had, relationships. They resolved estranged relationships, and on like this. And as I say, pretty much 100% of those people had major changes. And it was extraordinary to me. First of all, the power of that group and why people said it worked so well for them. And for some people, it was the idea that I mentioned earlier of a group of strangers sending intention for them, and how healing that feeling is of just these people you have no other connection with doing this sacrificial act for you. That's incredible. And also the feeling of being part of something. We're so isolated. We've lost that. And it should be noted, by the way, that most of these people and people in my master classes have never physically met. They know each other only virtually. They've only worked together via Skype or Google Hangouts. Nevertheless, it becomes their intention family. And to know, many of them carry on well after the year is over. And in one sense, I remember with one case, a guy was, he was in touch with one of the members almost every day, and they would intend for each other. And he said to him one day, "Robert, I had insomnia last night." He said, "Don't worry, I had you covered." And he just knew that this guy's intending for him all the time, intending for his well-being. It's hugely strengthening. And there's also the issue of altruism. One of the things that I did in the middle of the group, and again, this was an experiment for me too, there were some people where they were getting intention from the group week after week, and nothing was happening in their lives. They weren't improving. Like Andy, who was going through a divorce and had sold her gift shop and she had children, she didn't have steady income, she was really worried, and she kept intending for a certain amount of money to come in her lap and everything to be fine. And her group did it, nothing. And we were trying everything with her. We were trying retro intention. We were trying going back to her seed moment to see if there was scarcity. We were doing all kinds of things, and nothing was working. So I finally just said, "Andy, get off of yourself. Just stop intending for you altogether." And I had a particular other person in mind, a young boy called Luke. His father had written into me and said that his stepson had broken up with his first major girlfriend, and in a fit of, adolescent existential angst, had chucked himself off of a 40-foot structure onto hard ground. And everything in his body was broken. He had broken bones, he had nerve damage, he had brain damage, everything. He was a mess. And the doctors didn't think he was going to live. So we set up a healing vigil with our master classes to send intention to Luke. And they did it about 3 times, and Andy was one of them. And Luke got better miraculously early. First of all, he lived, he got better. The parents who were monitoring what was going on with him right after we'd send our intention and sent us a running commentary about it would tell us that his mood completely shifted and lots of things shifted right after our intention. It was quite interesting. It could have been all coincidence and just good doctoring. Maybe so. But he got out of the hospital in record time and was healed. But I knew it wasn't a placebo effect because Luke, like, most 15-year-olds, believes that his parents' belief in the power of intention is completely stupid. But what was really interesting is what happened to people like Andy. Andy, as soon as she started intending for Luke, got a call completely out of the blue with a dream job, and ultimately ended up with a brand new dream career. And that's been the case for a lot of the people in the groups when they get off of themselves and start intending for someone else. And it's, I think the missing piece here, as we talked about earlier, is altruism, is getting off of yourself. I think one of the big dangers of the self-help movement is just that, self. Too much influence and focus on the self.
Versus diving into meta-kindness, for instance.
Well, yes. And with intention, there's a really good reason why this could work. First of all, there's been some studies from University of California at Berkeley where they've shown that when people focus on, some of the world's victims and they think about them in an altruistic way, it fires up a thing called the vagus nerve, which is the largest nerve of the body. Starts at the top of the spine and it makes its way all the way through the body, through most of the major nerves. And it's kind of like a love nerve because it fires up and stimulates the release of oxytocin, which is the love hormone. It gets released whenever we, care for babies and all of that kind of thing. But what it also does is, as demonstrated by this study, is when people are focusing on another, less fortunate and, have feelings of altruism and concern like that, they are able to relate to people more who are not like them. And this goes back to my American Peace Intention experiment, the real idea about focusing on an altruistic act, having people make connections or feel more connected to people of the other political parties, say, or people who are not like them. So that goes on, but also the vagus nerve is like a wonderful virtuous circle. The more that is activated, the more it has great positive effects on our immune system. And so one can see why that would create better happiness, healthier body, all kinds of good things would happen. And then, of course, there's some sort of amazing element in the universe that allows things like windfalls, money, and, dream jobs to come through too.
Awesome. So let's talk real briefly about the flip side of things and maybe what we can start to extrapolate or have an idea to do about. One of the things that I see a big challenge is, and I'm not a big fan of it, is the traditional news. And I'm putting that in quotes, because if we get so many people focused on negative events, that sounds like as a corollary to this, we're not doing the world any good, and we're certainly not doing ourselves any good.
Well, yes. I mean, that's just negative information we allow into our bodies that is making us angry, etc. I mean, if you look at this Berkeley study, this University of California Berkeley study, they had another group of students who were looking at photos just designed to elicit pride. Pictures of Berkeley students, pictures of Berkeley football team and Berkeley colors, the separate, hey, we're better than everybody else kind of idea. And at the end, when they tried to test who they felt closest to, the other people looking at those pictures of the world's victims, et cetera, like Biafra victims, they were able to connect with people not like them. But the people looking at the Berkeley photos only connected with people like them and people who were, professionals, the people that they would become. So it's kind of a separatist thing. And what I'm getting at is when you have negativity in the news and talking always about this group or that group being this and that, as we look at the American news, depending on which station you watch, it's highly critical of the other party. And as you keep sending that into somebody's body, so they take those feelings in themselves and they are more and more alienated from the other. And so it's very dangerous, very dangerous. And the media in America has to take responsibility and blame for some of what's going on now.
Thank you. Let's go from there. Let's go to a real positive, which is I'm going to take off my coaching hat. I'm going to put it on you now. I don't want to leave people today without giving them some good homework to do. What one homework assignment would you want to give people today?
Okay. First of all, find yourself a group. Now, this can be a group at your church group, your book group, your office, your neighborhood, the like-minded friends you meet for coffee every so often, the people you jog with. Get them together and try a little group intention. And try making it for someone in the group with a health challenge or somebody outside the group. And a few things. One is create the intention statement together. The real key element here is everybody holding the same intention statement together. So I'm talking about holding it in your head, but formulating it together. Like our intention is that Jane Doe will be free of all pain in her right hip. And you agree on that. You hold it very tightly in your head at first. You focus with all of your five senses on Jane Doe being well in every way, and imagine her, use a lot of visualization, her being well, skipping around, not being in any kind of pain, and and then take that down to your heart and send it out together and hold hands. So that's a little primer, a little 101 intention for how to do it in a group. So my first recommendation is just get yourself a group and see what happens and create your own intention experiments.
Woohoo! Would you have a homework assignment or any guidance you would give us as Inspire Nation Show? We're in every country around the world. We've got hundreds of thousands of listeners. How do we use this, or what can we start to do to help?
To help America, or to help in just expanding this?
Expanding this.
Well, I invite people to read my book. I invite people to create these groups. It's what is amazing to me is I used to always think we needed a critical mass. We don't. We need just little pods of people in groups of 8. Mm-hmm. And those pods themselves become powerful little instruments of change because they're changing everyone in the pod. And that is having, as I said before, an enormous ripple effect out into the world.
Beautiful. Jessica, my wife, she's the producer of the show. She always wants me to ask, what can we do for parents for their kids with this knowledge?
I think try bringing your children in on these kinds of groups too. This is nothing that just adults have to do. Children could do. It's such a simple modality of people holding on, holding hands, holding an intention statement together, feeling the effects. And children who are so tuned into the field anyway will feel this extraordinary feeling of energy and electricity. You'll feel it as soon as you hold hands in a circle. You'll feel these amazing effects, amazing feelings of light, etc. And children should be introduced to this because this is the new science. This is the new knowledge.
Woohoo! So, what personally brings you, kind of a tangential question, what personally brings you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
I had a woohoo factor when I finally finished this book. That was a big woohoo factor because it had been, it's been something that my husband really had to nudge me to write this book because I was still feeling I need more proof. I need to do something about this for many years. For me personally, watching what happens to people organizing these groups, watching, if I run a batch of groups when I'm speaking somewhere, I just did it about a month ago. I'm going to be speaking at the Mile High Church in another couple of days. I'll put the people into groups. Watching what happened, I'll give you a little taster of this. I did this with the Mile High Church about 2 months ago. There was a guy, Wes, who was a Vietnam vet. He was supposed to go to university and be a scientist, and he got drafted the last year of high school, and so he had a low draft number and he had to go. Mm-hmm. And it totally derailed his whole life. He came back, he was depressed by everything he'd experienced. He just went on a terrible spiral. He finally met, late in his life, he met somebody he fell in love with. He had a few good years with her, and then she died of cancer. It was just awful to hear his story. And he had just got to a point in his mid-60s of feeling like, well, what's the use? He was a sender in one of these groups, and he woke up the next day, and it was like he was totally rejuvenated. He was one of those, the grass is greener now, the flowers smell better. He got up, he was able to do stuff, he was able to volunteer for stuff. He's like a different person now. That is what turns me on and makes me get up in the morning, is seeing that this work has such powerful effect. And maybe it was something I've stumbled on, and maybe it's something I can't totally explain, but I know now that it works and that I need to be an apostle of this. I need to tell it to the world.
It's your mission. Absolutely. on that note then, where can people go to find out more and to find your beautiful book, The Power of Eight?
Thank you. They can go to my website,
Mhm.
which is lynnmctaggart.com. They can join in the American Peace Intention Experiment, the AmericanIntentionExperiment.com. They can find my book it's already in America and the UK on Amazon and all online book and actual bookstores. And it will be coming out in the Netherlands in, I believe, the late January, and Spain, and it'll be out in 2018 in other countries around the world.
Awesome, awesome. And so lynnmctaggart.com, you say?
lynnmctaggart.com.
Fantastic. And if you didn't catch lynnmctaggart.com, come on over to inspirenationshow.com. We'll get you over to lynnmctaggart.com. Few last quick questions. This has just been phenomenal. First off, with our reach on the show, any advice you'd give us to help others? Mass consciousness, focusing on things together, group prayer.
Well, I think, a great idea is to get the audience together and try some experiments for yourselves. I mean, try those groups of 8. Try to get people on virtual groups of 8, or try it as one giant audience and give them an intention. I mean, I've done informal, obviously I'm doing ones that are big, measured intention experiments, but why not try your own informal ones? I mean, in the book, I've got a load of experiments people can try for themselves, but try doing something to help with some of the current crises. We did a little Facebook intention to lower the severity of Hurricane Irma as it hit Florida. And, I do things like that. I just was in Manchester recently and talking about, we did an intention to lower violence and terrorist activity in the UK. And so try these things out and come together as a group. And also look what happens to your own life when you're doing it. That's the other piece.
Cool, will do. So 2 last things. Any last words of wisdom first, and then maybe a 1-minute primer of group prayer if you have time for that.
Okay. My word of wisdom is really, as I say, get off of yourself. We are, you mentioned about Jean-Paul Sartre. He said, hell is other people. And my husband wrote in his book, The Untrue Story of You, no, hell is thinking there are other people. And I added a little extra to that, which is actually other people are your salvation. And when you realize that getting off of yourself is the key to your own health, your own happiness, your own well-being, your own life. And I'm not just talking about, doing nice, feel-good things. I'm talking about something necessary for you. That is where you put your focus and your thoughts. So, we've had phrases like do unto others. Now I want to just amend that and make it think unto others.
Woohoo! Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you. What you're saying, the work you're doing is making a tremendous difference in the world. And I think if people are listening to this today, if you really soak this in, it really does change everything.
It does change everything. It does change everything. So I'm going to just have a little intention. I just want you to feel this for a minute. So we'll just do one for a minute. Normally I do it for 5 or 10 minutes, and that's all you need. But I want you to focus on, let's come up with an intention, Michael. Why don't you come up with an intention for me? What would you like to intend for?
For the world?
For the world. For an area of the world. Let's make it specific.
Oh, let's go with, I'm going to have a hard time choosing which one, and I'm biased based on our hemisphere. I don't know if it would be, I don't know where the suffering is most. Is it Puerto Rico? Is it Mexico right now? Maybe we'll do for Puerto Rico.
Okay. And what would you like to intend specifically?
I think they need the lights back on so that the people in the hospitals and for the elderly and to be able to get the medical care. I think that's
Okay.
first and foremost.
Okay, let's say yes. Okay. So let's take a deep inhale and a deep exhale. And a deep inhale and a deep exhale. And a deep inhale and a deep exhale. And now I'd like you to formulate this intention in your mind. Our intention is that Puerto Rico have its electricity restored, have the health care it needs, have the help it needs to restore, to heal and help those people who have been injured recently in all of the terrible hurricanes and weather events, and also to be restored so that their country is fully functioning. So let's just imagine that going on. Just imagine it with your 5 senses. So you're really alert right now. You're not meditating. You're feeling it, you're seeing it, you're tasting it, you're smelling it, you're seeing it. And you're hearing it. Use your 5 senses as you imagine Puerto Rico getting back on its feet. And let's just hold it. And while we're holding it, although we're all separate on our computer screens, there's a psychic internet that connects us. So let's just feel the energy and the connection that we're creating with this giant Power of 8 circle. And let's just hold it for a moment. And feel the energy. Our intention is that Puerto Rico have all of its facilities and electricity fully restored and be fully functioning so it can heal its population and get back to normal. Okay, in your own time, come on back into the present and open your eyes.
Woohoo!
Thanks so
you
much.
so much, Lynn. This has been beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. It's joy.
Awesome. I'm going to crank it back up for the finish. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get the power of 8, and discover the miraculous power of group intention, and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!